I see. And well, I'm assuming you did do language training in Vietnam, and how was that? How was that learning Vietnamese?
Do you know what? I actually haven't done it.
I haven't.
The funny thing is, I learned a lot of it just by people just literally just speaking Vietnamese around me.
Yeah.
But with learning most languages, I can understand a lot more than I can speak. So I can understand what someone's saying to me, but like apart from like ordering food or something like that, it's just like I don't remember it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I haven't done any formal training, but I definitely will. And I think
Mm.
it's funny. Everyone says in the South, "Oh, learn this like the Southern accent," but then I was speaking to someone the other day, and I was speaking to one of the like Vietnamese consultants. I think it was at KPMG, and they were like,
Yeah.
"I learn the Northern accent because it's better when you're talking to the government if you have like a Northern accent."
Mm.
So I was like, "Yeah, but if I learn a Northern accent, people in the South aren't going to understand me." Just like all these like
Compromise.
troubles associated with that.
Go in the middle,
Yeah,
mate. London,
yeah,
the
like Da Nang accent.
yeah, Da Nang and Nha Trang accent.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Ah, wow. Well, so okay, and yeah, so obviously you're a Vietnamese NCP scholar.
Mm.
So you did your study component there at
Yeah, so
RMIT.
that's right.
Yeah.
It's a shame because I wanted to do it at a local institution,
Mm.
and it was an uphill battle with NCP. I was lucky enough that when I went to RMIT that I had Vietnamese lecturers,
Mm.
but um, a difficulty with the Vietnamese market, as you can appreciate, is unless you know people there, like it's a real like credibility thing. Like people don't want to deal with people that they don't know or institutions they don't know. So
Sure.
when I was applying for universities there, I was sending emails. Like I would have sent hundreds of emails off
Yeah.
um, because people didn't know me or the university I was from. It was just like don't respond.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, if you want to study there, let me know. I can. I know some people from other universities,
Mm.
but from the outside, it's really difficult. Certainly a good market to get involved in because of
Mm.
that, for that reason, because I
Yeah.
think Australian businesses, as we diversify as well, there'll be a need for people that know the market and know, how it operates.
I guess just touching on the point that you said with learning at RMIT, do you think there was a difference if you went to a local university compared to RMIT?
Look, it's hard to say.
Mm.
I think as I said, I studied under a number of Vietnamese lecturers, and certainly everyone at RMIT lectures in English,
Yeah.
which I can't anticipate that every other university in Vietnam does. I know some universities do, but
Mm.
typically
Yeah.
they don't. So, I mean, in that sense, it would be quite different. And I know, for example, you know, some of the Indonesian scholars, like Zach Luke, for example, he did his courses in Indonesian. I mean, that's really impressive. My Vietnamese just isn't there to do that, and
Yeah.
I hope one day it is. And
Yeah.
certainly, if you have that, do it.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, it is challenging. I think one takeaway I would say from, for example, working at KPMG, as you can probably appreciate, the Vietnamese language, like in the words that you use, is much more complex than English in the sense that, like, when we were writing that report,
Mm.
some words have five meanings, and one of the consultants would put in some sort of phrase, and then it would go to the Vietnamese partner. He'd go, no, it has to be like this phrase, not this phrase, and they're the exact same meaning, but just because it's like one, like it's a tiny, tiny bit different,
Yeah.
it means something completely different. And in the context of having a strong communist government in Hanoi, you really don't want to offend the government. So it's quite challenging, and I can imagine it would be quite the same studying and writing reports or assignments in the language as well.
Mm. Did you find that when you were writing the report in English, or was that just mostly when they were translating from Vietnamese, or just looking at documents that were in Vietnamese?
I think, well, I had a really important lesson early on because I wrote something for the report,
Yeah.
and the American director who I reported to came up to me and he said, "Why'd you write that?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "What are you doing?" Like, what are you talking about? He said, if we publish that and that goes to like the government, we could all be arrested. It's like, what do you mean? He's like, because that comes across as like saying that their government is like, you know, their policies are incompetent, rather than saying that like these new policies will be strengthen the existing policies, you know.
It's how you phrase things.
Yeah, exactly. So it was really difficult proposing steps that the government could take without saying that the existing, you know, system isn't working or isn't going to meet the expectations. And so in English, that was the real challenge. And I think that's even more so complicated in Vietnamese, because there are so many phrases that mean the same thing. And they're just slight differences. And certainly there is the regional thing as well, because, you know, something that is offensive in the South or something that's not offensive in the South might be the opposite in the North.
Well, yeah, I definitely can't say that I'll know the difference. My accent is very much from the South, and I've learned it very colloquially at home, and that's the extent of my vocab. And I went to like Vietnamese school on Saturdays just to learn like, you know, pronunciation and all those characteristics. But yeah, I think would be a lot different if I was to learn Vietnamese in Vietnam, I think.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, because not only has there been quite a strong cultural separation between the Vietnamese that left Vietnam, you know, a lot of like Republican Vietnamese are very like even write things differently to the Vietnamese in country, even if they are both from the South. They write differently because, you know, it's just very quickly, I think the government re-educated people after the war. And so that creates a lot of, you know, challenges, especially for people that have, you know, been raised, that are Vietnamese like yourself, but have been raised in a Western country, really trying to reconnect. And I mean, for example, like one of the consultants that I work with, she grew up in Vietnam, but went and studied in the US. And coming back, she really struggled like writing in Vietnamese, because it was so, like I said, really complicated getting the right wording. So I totally empathize with that.
I guess you would, in some sense, have a better or easier time because you learn from A to B and from start, rather than having a lot of my own habits, so like how my own slang and how I say words would probably impact of how I learn things. Well, and your time, you also interned in Vietnam, but you also did a lot of other internships prior in other countries as well, in Japan. Did you want to speak a little bit about your internships in Vietnam, and as well as the other internships overseas?
So as I said, intern at KPMG in Vietnam, did a lot of all right, let's do this in a linear manner. So I was super smart, sarcastically speaking, in the sense that I did what a lot of law students do coming out of university, which is clerkships. I did those in what would have been my penultimate year, because of NCP, it got extended. So I clerked at a couple of top tier firms, went to Kingwood Mallison's, Coors, Chambers, and then Ashurst. And then NCP came around, and I was like, oh, well, you know, I'll go to NCP instead of getting a grad job. And the law firms were like, well, you know. So exactly. Yeah. So I went and did NCP, which no regrets whatsoever, because, you know, when I did the clerkships, I thought, I really want to do law. I really want to stay in the legal industry, and I really enjoy it. And then when I got to Vietnam and I interviewed before the partner at KPMG, he said to me, look, you know, you've done plenty of clerkships and internships in law now. Do something in consulting, see if you like it. Even if you don't like it, it'll be valuable experience. So I went and did that, and something that I didn't realize when I started was the problem I always found with law is it's very narrow, in the sense that, you know, if you go and do a clerkship, you go and do it in banking, or you go and do it in construction. And then if you get a grad job, you'll do rotations in different areas, but eventually you'll settle in one area. And the thing with consulting is that it's always broad. You're always doing different things. And the director said to me once, there's two reasons that companies come to consultants.
Yeah.
It's either because they have a question that's too expensive for them to solve themselves, or they have a question that they just can't solve themselves. So you're always doing quite interesting questions. For example, this innovation report, a company or a group of pharmaceutical companies came to us and said, look, we want to figure out what the value of innovation is in in the pharmaceutical industry in Vietnam. So like, how do you value innovation? I have no idea, and so we literally had to sit down and really like think about it. And then we had to meet with academics, business leaders to try and shape this thing. So yeah, I did a bunch of projects like that. We also did some market entry stuff, foreign companies, which is quite interesting. And I found it to be a lot more interesting than law because it's so broad. You're always doing different stuff. And then, so immediately prior to that, I'd done the Mitsubishi internship. As I said, look, it's run by NCP and Mitsubishi Group together. It's only 2 weeks, or it might have even been a bit less. So really, you're just getting to know the companies rather than actually doing like super tangible work. We did some stuff like projects or presentations where we had to sort of demonstrate some thought leadership around what we thought the future of innovation would be, stuff like that. But it's not like when I was working at KPMG, for example, or even my clerkships where you're actually doing work. So I did those things. I also did a stint. I did the Bangkok stuff as well. And I mean, all of those experiences, whether you're a law student or a business student or otherwise, would definitely recommend trying to do as broad a stuff as possible in NCP. Really thinking about what areas have I done or what areas have I not done, and what areas do I like, and where can I really explore those areas. For Vietnam, that could be in agriculture, for example, which is a great link between Australia and Vietnam.
That's right. Wow. So to your point of doing clerkships, I'm not a law student, but it seems like clerkships was quite an important thing if you are a law student, if you are looking to do a grad program or get into the law industry. Is that the typical path that a lot of law students take? And I guess, can you also do law, like legal aspects, or like be a lawyer, quote unquote, in consulting, or is that like just not in the domain of actually consulting?
So it depends. So if you want to go into commercial law, so for example, the distinction being as opposed to criminal law or family law or something like that. Commercial law is anywhere from creating banking agreements about issuing bonds or shares to developing projects like oil pipelines or rail to resolving disputes, that kind of stuff. If you want to go into that area and you want to do it, there's a number of pathways. But if you want to go into like the top tier, a lot of people really like, and that's supposedly the most desirable. It's kind of like the whole like stepping back. I think law school in general, law students are really enticed by this kind of Suits mentality. The Suits TV show where like, Harvey Specter and all that. And it kind of glorifies commercial law. What you realize at the end is, and even during clerkships, is the legal sector is nothing like that. Like you simply, Suits, for example, they're always threatening people and holding leverage over people and all that stuff.
Nothing like that?
No.
Not even a little bit?
You're simply not allowed to. There are, solicitors have conduct rules and you can be disbarred for threatening people. You just simply can't do that. And there are duties to be courteous and those kind of things. So in that sense, it's completely different. Anyway, so a lot of people kind of think that, well, I want to be Harvey Specter, I want to be a top tier lawyer, so I'm going to go do clerkships. And that's one reason for doing it. Another reason is, well, you have a genuine interest in going into commercial law, and you want to build projects. For me, that certainly was. I like, ever since I was a kid, like Lego building stuff. So I was like, I want to just build stuff. So I went and did a clerkship in like projects, real estate, and then did like energy and stuff like that. So yeah, a lot of people see that as like the pinnacle step before you graduate to go and do that, because a lot of what will happen then is firms will either offer you a job or they won't. Yeah. For me, they were like, well, you're going away for 18 months on NCP, so why would I offer you something if you're going to go get a job overseas? So that's what happened to me. But yeah, I mean, I think it was really valuable. Certainly, I would encourage people to apply, but I wouldn't do it over NCP, because on NCP you can do like really cool stuff like consulting. You can do legal consulting, which is what a lot of foreign lawyers do in Asia. So they don't actually do legal work, in the sense that I might advise you on the way that you can enter a country like Vietnam or Singapore or whatever, but I can't actually sign off on the deal because I'm not a Vietnamese lawyer. I'm a foreign registered lawyer. So that's where the consulting aspect comes in. You can do legal consulting as opposed to being a specific lawyer.
Yeah. And now you're doing a master's in governance. Is that the direction now that you're looking towards, or are you still looking to do go down the route of consulting, but still have that background in law, but also have governance and maybe enter the international relations scene in that way?
Yeah. The purpose of doing a master's of governance is to really better understand them. So, I talk about this project at KPMG where we're advising the government on how they can go about implementing policies to make Vietnam an innovative pharmaceutical hub. Doing this master's will really allow me to kind of understand the process of governance and understand how we can like practically implement those steps beyond, my background. I think it's a really good filler for COVID as well. The job market's really bleak at the moment. So if I can't earn, I may as well learn, right?
That's right. Well, mate. Well, yeah. Looking back in your time in Vietnam, was there anything that really stood out to you? Like, I remember you when we met, you're like, I'm gonna go home now. I'm like, are you gonna catch the Vietnam taxi? I'm like, no, I'm gonna ride my bike. I'm like, wait, what? You're gonna ride your bike?
Yeah. Things that stood out. I think that the cultural aspects, like really driving, like, dropping yourself in the culture, like even riding a bike, for example, is, some people would say it's super crazy, and some NCP scholars didn't do it. And I think you really miss out if you don't, because it is an important aspect of Vietnamese culture. Like the motorbike is, part of Vietnamese culture. And you can explore so many other things when you have a bike, like if I want to go down that road, let's see what that road has. And as you know, like random alleyways can have like entire communities. Exactly. Like random stuff. I think that was certainly a key takeaway, is like the importance of having a bike, as opposed to like using taxis all the time. What else? I think certainly the importance of language, and I say that having not done language training, it just kind of panned out that way. I didn't intend it. I actually originally intended to do language training at the start, but it just didn't pan out that way. I think that really having a base level language understanding is quite important to engaging, particularly in Vietnamese culture, Japanese culture as well. Is really important, and I think that's going to be something that like is a key takeaway, and something that I'm still looking to study. So people say that, and then everyone's like, yeah, we know like language is important, but like really like you miss out on stuff by not having the language there. And also I think weirdly enough, being a Westerner has different impacts on your life. There are a lot of drawbacks, but there's some like unfair positives, particularly being a white Westerner. I know like being a Western Vietnamese person as well has benefits in Vietnam, as you probably experienced. But certainly for me, it was something that I didn't anticipate. So, there is particularly at the end when everyone was required to wear a mask for COVID. I started getting people feel really uncomfortable around me purely because I'm white, and I'd been in the country for 9 months. Like it wasn't like I'd just come in. And like I got in a lift, and people would get out of the lift and stuff, random stuff like that, and that kind of sucks.
I see.
But the positives, like sometimes people will favor you and stuff, and it's really hard because you don't. For example, if I'm buying food, sometimes they'll come like to our table first instead of going to like other people's table, and it's really hard because you're like, no, like go and serve them first, like and so I think that's like coming to terms with my identity in that situation can be quite difficult. Sorry, I've got an itchy nose. And also I think a lot of like another thing that people don't prepare themselves for is some of the bad stuff that happens that you can't control. Like domestic violence is it's treated very differently in places like Vietnam. It's a family issue. It's not a public issue. So people, you'll see someone beating up their wife in public and no one will do anything. And you're like,
wow.
Yeah, I saw it happen. Or like even stuff like bike theft. I saw someone get their bike stolen in front of me, like, and someone drive off, and you see like the whole commotion. You're like, whoa, like that could have been me, So different cultural stuff, like in the ways that different cultures deal with stuff, is super fascinating, but can be quite scary at times for sure.
Wow, lots on wrap there. Bikes. Well, from it's probably very biased and subjective advice from my mom, but she told me to never get on a bike by yourself in Vietnam. But I think because you do ride bikes here in Australia, so I guess that was a little bit more natural with you. But obviously, maneuvering around traffic and understanding the new road rules is like something you had to learn on the fly. There's no handbook, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't ridden a bike before I went. So I think I had the edge in the sense that like I learned like the Vietnamese way of driving, which is just insane. I mean, I think the basic rule that someone told me is in Vietnam, you only care about what's in front of you. Don't worry about what's behind you, unless it's a big car or something.
Or a bus.
Or a bus, yeah. In which, I mean, I had some close calls with buses and stuff, but typically, it's not. I mean, look, it is quite dangerous. Looking statistically, lots of foreigners die in Vietnam all the time. For whatever reason, there's a lot of Europeans and a lot of like South Africans get killed. And the numbers themselves, there's a lot of, I mean, they have something like 6,000 road deaths in the first like 4 months or 5 months of the year. I mean, it's a lot of people.
Wow. Yeah.
So I mean, it can be quite dangerous. But if you stick to the I want to say, that's the other side of the road, stick to the right, don't go too fast. Those kind of things, you'll be right. Go and get your license. I went and got my license. It's so fun. You got to do like this little figure of 8 and that sort of stuff. Super terrifying because you have these like you have all these like dudes watching you to make sure if you like touch the line, it's like you're out.
First time, first go, all good.
Yeah. It was funny because when I did it, I was on this tiny Honda Wave. If you know scooters, that like it's like a standard semi-automatic kind of scooter. But for me, I'm like 6'2". It was like riding a little tricycle kind of thing. And I'm trying to do this figure of 8, and it's like a really tight turn, and my legs started cramping, and I'm like, I'm trying to do this thing. And I because it was cramping so hard, I was like touching the line. And you're allowed to fail, like you're allowed to like touch the line 5 times or like make 5 mistakes. And I think I did 4 and I passed. And
That's it.
So freaking it was I mean, I wouldn't, some people do it like me, they do it every day and it's fine. I'd say at least do it once for the experience and then, put it away. It's a
Mm.
bit different if you're there for a long time. If you're there
That's
for
right.
like a couple of weeks or like a month, then it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
And about your point about I guess being like a foreigner in like Vietnam and being Japan, I'm assuming your experience, even in Thailand, because they've got so many foreign tourists, then I guess it's a lot more easy, and maybe they see a lot more foreigners in society more often compared to Vietnam. I'm not sure, but you probably may have had photos taken of you. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I did.
That's a little bit different in like Japan or Thailand, where foreigners are just everywhere because they're tourists, right? But like in Vietnam, it's like a novel thing. So
it can be really dissuasive, like, because I lived in, if you know Ho Chi Minh City, I lived in District 7, which is a little bit far out. I mean, I say, everyone says it's so far out of the city, but like in Australian terms, it's like 3 kilometers outside the center of town.
Yeah.
So that's like a long way. That's like, that can be anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour and a half away from the center of the city, depending on traffic.
Exactly.
But even just being like 3 kilometers out, I'd go and get my groceries, and I'd be standing there waiting for my friend or something, and then someone would like get their kid to stand next to me and they'd take a photo or something like that. Like, what are you doing? Like, I'm not the only white person in this district. Like, why are you taking a photo of me? This is so weird. And someone pranked me once because we were in like, I think we were in like Mune or Trinh or something like that, and someone's like, that's Justin Bieber, and all these people are like, oh my god, and I'm like, I don't even look like him. What are you doing? Like, and these people like ran across like this really, really busy street to get a photo with me. It was crazy. So yeah, I mean, it's funny because some foreigners there become like celebrities simply by speaking Vietnamese. And like getting involved in the culture. Like there's this dude that I know, he's an expat. He started up a page like 7 months ago, and called himself Phuc Map, and now he's like super big in Vietnam. He has like I think a couple 100,000 followers, and like he's like an icon. I'm like, what has this dude done that's like, it's just simply because he like speaks Vietnamese, because it's so rare for foreigners to speak like a good level of Vietnamese. Have you, so I mean, do you find that you have a unique experience having grown up in Australia, coming to Vietnam, you know, speaking Vietnamese, but having grown up in Australia, do you find that you get treated like differently than other Vietnamese people that have lived there?
I think yes. When I was younger, when I did visit Vietnam, my skin was actually quite, I guess, lighter than the typical Vietnamese. My uncle, he's been living there all his life, and is really much more tanned, super tanned, because like, you know, the Vietnamese sun is just like unforgiving, right? You stand in the sun for like a couple hours and you just tan like nonstop. So I think that's where they drew, or like they just like somehow just put all those things together. They're like, this guy isn't from here. Then when I spoke, it wasn't bad Vietnamese, but it wasn't also like smooth and like local, super slangy and super loud Vietnamese, local Vietnamese as well.
Yeah.
So that's where they sort of also understood that I was a foreigner as well, in some ways. But yeah, I think my most recent trip, I think I've just tried to speak Vietnamese as much as I can. And when I roam the streets, maybe I don't get the looks that you get. Obviously, the looks are like, you know, they're not like bad looks, but the looks that I get, that it's typically just that I'm just another, either I am Vietnamese or from another Asian country. So yeah, I don't feel like I get a different sort of treatment. Have you heard any stories from like other Vietnamese or like Vietnamese internationals feeling a bit different or getting treated differently?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speak for people, but I have heard, you know, stories where, I think for many, like, I mean, for example, in there's expat forums, right? And all the time you'll see American Vietnamese, for example, that have grown up in America, don't speak Vietnamese, who want to go back and live in Vietnam and really learn the language and stuff. And they really, really struggle, I think, coming to terms with the kind of dichotomy between like the Vietnamese culture and Western culture, even in the way that, you know, we dress, the way we hold ourselves, the way we eat stuff. Like that was certainly for me, like eating beef in the morning was like so weird when I first got there, right? Because we usually eat like maybe like bacon or typically cereal or something, so it was quite odd. But no, I'm curious. I am curious to hear your perspective, and I'm glad that you haven't found any issues with it. I think there is a term. For overseas Vietnamese, but I don't. Is it? Yeah, that's it. So yeah, it's interesting. Like, I mean, I as I said, I can't speak for anyone, but I'm always curious to hear different perspectives. Some of my most Australian, in the sense that like strongest accent Australian mates are Vietnamese Australian. So I think in a sense that like I don't consider you know anyone any different. But certainly like I think the big thing is people in Vietnam like really struggle to see like to understand how like a Vietnamese person or like a Chinese person in Australia could have like a super Australian accent. Like my friends always get so confused. They're like, isn't he Vietnamese? Like how does he have like how does right? Because I had a friend come over and like they met like my Vietnamese mates and they were just so confused that you know even in Singapore, because I did an exchange at Nanyang there. One of my Vietnamese friends came over and she said like she was talking to the taxi driver and she's like, oh, but like you're Chinese, like I don't understand how like you're like Singaporean, like aren't you Chinese, like do you speak Chinese, like it's just I think like if you grow up in like such a mono-ethnic society, the idea of like multiculturalism is quite foreign.
That's right. I think for me, I guess being there in February, I think I would actually feel very comfortable living there for a long period of time. But I do feel myself also, I guess, also going back to having like a Western style and Western sort of lifestyle as well. And I'm glad there's like a expat community there. I guess it's growing and it's there. It's very much there. But I can see myself just eating beef every day. Like, did you eat pho or did you eat like? What did you eat in the morning with beef?
What did I have? I don't have bar or
Was it
do you know what food I really
with bread?
I like banh mi.
Yeah.
It's funny. I went to this like banh mi stand and every day I went to the same one and they started to get to know me and they're like asking my friends about me every day, like, oh, where's he from? Like, you know, like all that stuff. And yeah, so I'd have banh mi, pho, bún bò, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I got so sick of bún bò, I can't have it anymore. I ate it too much, and now
What was your favorite? I guess favorite dish as well, like a favorite sort of meal that isn't like super.
Probably pho. I think because like the only problem that I found when I was living in Vietnam, and you might have experienced this, is because there's so much MSG and stuff. I started getting really high blood pressure, and I went to the doctor. I'm like, yeah, like I feel like really like kind of tired, and like I just feel like I'm like I just have high blood pressure, you know, because you just know it when you have it. And the doctor's like, yeah, it's probably a mixture of the pollution and all the MSG that you're ingesting.
That's right.
And I remember because I used to go to the same pho place in my street every day. And I remember watching him one day, and this dude would just get like salt, and he just go, and it just all this salt would go into it. And I was thinking, oh, I'm ingesting that every day. It's hard because as well, it's really hard to have an Australian diet in Asia because certainly me, I eat so much meat. You just can't get you don't have access to that kind of meat in Asia. So you really can't, especially in Vietnam. It's certainly economical to eat that way, but it's hard to to balance having so much MSG, even in the sauces and stuff, because of course everyone puts half a tree in their pho and then like, you know, half the bottle of like hot chili sauce or whatever.
Yeah, because in Australia, at least, or how my mom makes it, she gets a lot of like beef bones and like a lot of the beef flavor from that. But in Vietnam, it's obviously a lot more expensive to get like solid quality beef. So they make up for it with the solid MSG and everything else that comes with it.
Yeah, I think that's I certainly when I go back, I think I'm gonna start asking them to put like less salt in, if any salt at all, and just risk having bad pho on the basis that I'm not ingesting that much MSG. It's interesting. It is stuff like that is a leading cause of death in Vietnam. Interestingly enough, among like cardiovascular disease, because everyone smokes as well. Because smokes are like $1. I'm lucky I never got involved in it, but yeah, I mean beer is a problem.
I heard that the laws for like drink driving is much more stricter now, so that's cut down hopefully.
Well, it's funny because well, a problem in Vietnam, as with many countries, is corruption, and unfortunately, that I mean it is changing. The government is really pressuring the police not to do that, and certainly they're driving change through digitization. So I know just before I left, Ho Chi Minh City had started doing digital fines instead of doing it by the book. But yeah, they just before I left, they made it. You have to have 0 alcohol when you're driving. You're like, that's never going to happen. But and then COVID happened and they stopped breath testing people. So I imagine that they'll only get you if you're super drunk. But I mean I don't think it changed many people's mentality, frankly. Like they have the 0 tolerance policy, but I mean like all my friends were still drinking as much as normal. I stopped because I was like, I don't want to pay. I think they wanted to charge like they were starting to charge like $300 Australian for a fine, if not more. Yeah. When usually they'd charge you like $12.
Whatever you have.
Yeah, it's like 200K Vietnam dong, something like that, or like 500. Yeah, so crazy.
No, good times, man. Good times. Well,
not that I would ever drink.
Of course.
Yeah, that's right.
Just to make that clear.
Yeah.
No. I think we're both just starving to go back or just to travel as well. Hopefully everything opens up soon.
Definitely, and I think it's my hope that more people look to Vietnam to go there. I fear that I'm becoming one of those people that's like pushing the Vietnam train all the time, but it really is such an interesting place to be. And I think economic indicators, it makes sense to be there. It's the fastest growing country in ASEAN. It's recovered so quickly from COVID. I mean, they're still forecast to grow at like 4%, which would be amazing for Australia or like, right? Even Thailand is only growing just before COVID. They're only at about 2%. So it really is a place to be. And certainly in the geopolitical climate, as you know, Japan is funding companies to leave China and go to Vietnam. Apple's moved manufacturing there. Samsung's there.
That's right.
Yeah. So
well, listen to James and go to Vietnam, if not for tourism, for your NCP scholarship.
That's it.
Thanks for your time today, mate. I think we'll leave it there, and definitely reach out to James if you have any questions about the NCP or Vietnam. And
thanks for having me.
No, thanks for sharing all those amazing stories, and hopefully I'll see you again, maybe in Vietnam. Hey.
That's it.